All right. So, welcome to week 10, lesson 10, and we're talking about service today on how to create your personal religion. And service is part of one of the 7 agencies of personal religion. And the 7 agencies of personal religion, they are the techniques that supply favorable conditions for spiritual growth. They are the means in which you are enabled to maintain a living spiritual connection with true spiritual forces. They are also the means you can distribute the blessings of your growth to others. And when we say spiritual growth, we're referring to the awakening of your real needs, discernment of true meanings, and the recognition of values. We use the word value throughout this course, throughout this lesson. That is our term for truth. We use it synonymous with truth. And values are those things which last and those things which are lasting realities from the universal ultimate reality. So our use of the word values and truth are synonymous. The 7 agencies are sincerity, which is in prayer, worship, study, and fellowship, which we talked about last week. And the next 2 weeks, well, today we're talking about service, and then in week 11 and 12, we'll be working on our personal constitution. All right. So what we talked about was here. This week, I went back and I realized that there is an organic implementation of the agencies in our life. It looks like we all start with study first, from our very earliest upbringing. No matter what religion culture we're in, we start with study. Truth telling is highly important when it comes to next, followed by fellowship, the meeting of the minds, prayer, worship, service, and personal constitution. There isn't really an order to these 7 agencies, but when I look back and I observe just an organic flow, it looks like when for those individuals who have taken and prioritize their spiritual growth or their spirituality, it looks like it follows in some disorder, tends to be the norm. Prayer might come number 1, but it looks like overall we all start with a sense of studying the spiritual truths, learning how to be our authentic self, finding our tribe, learning how to pray, going deeper into worship, learning service, and then finally making a strong act towards working on a personal constitution. And that personal constitution is an outline and ordination of your personal lifestyle program. So last week we talked about fellowship and study. We may repeat that lesson because last week we were coming off the high of Thanksgiving and I was all giddy and excited. Today we're talking about service. All right, so let's jump right in it. Service. I'm defining service as cooperation with spirit and progress for the sake of others. The root word, the watchword for service is cooperation. And cooperation is the driving force of the evolution of life, okay? How did we go from being a unprotected, vulnerable mammal species to becoming the explorers of the universe? Think about the magnificence of that, right? Here we are, we start off as this primate, barely able to defend itself from the wild beasts, dinosaurs, but yet we've evolved over millennia to become the explorers of the ocean of outer space. That happens through cooperation, not just cooperation with other beings, but cooperations within ourselves on a cellular level. Our cells are cooperating. When you look at life in general, you see that bacteria, cells, there's always this act of cooperation that's happening that guides evolution. All right. There's cooperation for the sake of others. Those selfless acts of kindness, those selfless acts that give to others in their times of need, to give to others in their times of progress. And then there's Dharma, honoring your personal duty. So today we're going to talk about service in those 3 areas. in the light of cooperation as an evolutionary force for the sake of others, and Dharma. All right, let's talk about cooperators versus defectors. Defectors and cooperators, this is actually a scientific term that I borrowed from a scientific journal. And in the journal, they refer to, again, how this law of cooperation is one of the first laws that determine the flow of evolution and just nature in general. And in this scientific journal, they have this term called a defector. And they define a defector as a being or individual who only seeks to take from or use the benefits of those giving. Whereas a cooperator is one who actively and directly gives or shares talent, time, help for others. When you think about a bee colony, I love this image. It shows the cooperation of that bee colony. Every bee is playing their duty, doing what they're playing their assigned role, and it helps grow the colony. It helps produce what needs to be done. If one of those bees are defective, it seeks to take or only gain benefit or not offer what its role is. It can have a disastrous effect on the whole community. And whenever a community has more defectors than cooperators, deterioration and decline begin to occur. If you look at any neighborhood, any community, any institution in society, and you want to look and you want to get to the root cause of why is there deterioration in that family, in that community, in that company, in that system, you will find out that somehow or another there became an overabundance or out of balance proportion of those who were cooperators versus those who were defectors. We cannot have a society of people who are only taking, and not been able to give back selflessly or in a sense of positive surrender to your dharma, your duty, and kind acts. Progress and advancement can only happen when there are more cooperators than defectors. Our society will ultimately have to get to a place where we are no longer driven by profit for the sake of service. We cannot continue, we will get to a point where we will not be able to just operate off of pure profit motives drives. Because what happens is it becomes counterproductive to the things that we're seeking to achieve. We have to evolve to a place where we wake up to do what we do. Our work, our business, our livelihood is more so geared towards this is our duty, this is our dharma. And that is the sign, that is the pillar of an advanced society and civilization. People show up to work enthusiastically. People show up to complete their projects and their duties efficiently and in a sense of greatness about it because it is their duty, it is their service, not because someone isn't paying them or because they have to do it for profit. Right now, the lower we are on our evolutionary scale, we need that profit motive. Because some days that selfishness, until we have rid out of selfishness and we have truly become spiritually regenerated, the thing that helps get us out of the bed in the morning is making that almighty dollar. And that is unfortunate, but can we just tell some truth, okay? All right. Sometimes if it ain't for that mighty dollar, shit just ain't gonna get done. But unfortunately, that is a sign of immaturity, and that is a sign of material mindedness. But as we evolve, become more spiritual, we get things done and we do stuff because it needs to be done as our act of service. And hopefully one day our society will evolve into that. So talk more about human nature, cooperative or defective by nature. The normal human understands that cooperativeness is a part of his survival. So there's no one who doesn't get that for us to be gregarious or for us just to make ourselves available for other people is actually how we can enhance our survival. So it's not that we're not cooperative by nature. Most humans are cooperative by nature. But the more purely material focused mind, it leads to defective actions in the face of fear or the threat of loss. So even though we know it's good for us to be cooperative for the sake of our survival, in the midst of fear, in the midst of threat of loss, we quickly go defective. Think about the fable of the dog and the bone. Did y'all ever remember this story growing up when the butcher, he fetched the stray dog a bone, and the dog catches this bone from the butcher, and he's proud of this bone he's so excited. And like most dogs, he goes off in private to chew on his bone or bury it. But when he was walking over a walkway, a bridge, he noticed his reflection, what he thought was another dog with a bigger bone. And being intimidated and being insecure and being worked up in his purely animal fear, he goes to try to grab the other dog's bone or his reflection and loses his own bone that he has to the water. And of course, in his fear, the other dog or his reflection stole his bone. But it was all along his own reflection of fear. And that pretty much sums up the human condition. When our fears incite us or the threat of loss, it is very hard to remain cooperative or to pursue the path of cooperative spirit or nature for the sake of others. But through personal religion, when you are loyal to your values and you're loyal to your spirituality, and through the act of worship, you begin to have a spiritual regenerated mind that allows you to see past the illusion of your fears, that allows you to tune into your higher reality, the higher values, and it keeps you in that cooperative state or spirit. And not only do you benefit yourself, but you benefit others tremendously as well. And that is why this is the agency. Worship is the byproduct. Service is the byproduct of worship. Worship is service, and service is worship. Worship fills one up with the inner resources. If y'all remember talking about that on that lesson of worship, through worship, you align yourselves with the divine grace and mercy. That alignment fulfills you inwardly, and that leads to an overflow, leading you to the cooperation and progress in life of others. Not only does that grace and mercy reception lead you to serve other people enthusiastically, but it also allows you in a refreshing way where you're not doing it manipulatively or you're not doing it unwillingly. And then that grace administer of that worship, that out of that overflow, it comes back to you. Last week, Phoenicia was saying when she cooked that dinner for that family, and to see their excitement and to see the reception of the grace that she ministered, it gave her back more energy, right, Phoenicia? It came back to you. And then it not only did it come back to you, but then when you shared the story with us, it made us, it filled us up. So worship is service, and service is worship. I am led to share a little silly video of worship or service to get it in your head. Here is a training video that a small boutique made to give their employees motivation for service and let them know that service is selling and selling is service. It's a very funny, corny song, but I just find it amusing. But I find the underlining value that they're pointing to is that when you make yourself available for the people, it benefits everybody generally. Y'all are going to be like, why did I make y'all watch this?
Selling is service.
And service is selling.
Service is selling.
And selling is service.
I'm selling to the customers to make them feel all right.
I'm buying all.
Oops. Somebody wished that away and it did.
Hello there,
Nikki, how you doing today?
I'm in a good mood and it's here to stay.
I've got a customer here that wants an ulu to buy.
I'll send one right over. I've got plenty in supply.
Hello there, sir. I got some news for you. Your product is coming. It'll be here by 2.
Service is sell. Selling is service.
Selling is service.
Service is selling.
My name is Jill, and I don't like to sell. I'm an unhappy person, everyone can go to heck. Complain, complain, that's all I like to do. My kids are ratty, the weather is cloudy, and I'm feeling sick too.
Hello there, Jill. They call me Happy Pete. I came to the store to buy myself a treat.
Do whatever you want, I don't really care. Just leave me here moping in the depths of despair.
You look so unhappy that you're making me sad. I won't buy as much, 'cause now I feel bad.
Selling is service.
Service is selling.
Service is selling.
Selling is service.
Okay, now why did I make y'all suffer and watch that? Because I suffered and watched it, and I wanted y'all to endure the same suffering. But the underlying value that they're pointing at and realizing is actually very beneficial and relevant to this class on worship service, and service is worship. Because when you offer service to another person, you expand that person and it comes back and it benefits yourself. Now, we don't need to be doing it for profit driven, but we do it. And we all know, everyone can testify to the amazing benefit when you are being treated kind service at a restaurant or at a store, right? It does make you open up your pockets to give or to share. There's nothing like being treated well at a restaurant or at a store and with good customer service. And that is an analogy in the parable really to our work in the planet, being cooperative and being of good service. Thank y'all for watching that too. All right. Let's talk about Dharma. Dharma is your positive cooperation with your own duty. All right. It's cooperation with your assigned role or roles, despite your concern for another roles. When we think about service sometimes, we focus on this word of for the sake of others. It's being committed to the progress for the sake of others, being committed to your service or doing something on the behalf of others. Dharma, when you think of Dharma, it is about being committed to your role, cooperating with your role, despite your concern for another person's role. The word Dharma first appeared in the Bhagavad Gita. It's actually the first concept explored in the Bhagavad Gita that the other chapters in this Hindu sacred text is unfolding upon. The other chapters are based on the explanation and connecting about Dharma. And the basis is there's a story of an old king in battle who realizes through his revelation or his understanding that he has evil sons, or his sons aren't that spiritual, and he has this realization: why am I going to battle to fight other kings who are fathers, who I may put them in jeopardy? They won't be able to lead their families, and then if I win and my sons inherit, they'll even do more damage. And so he was praying to, or he was asking this to his spiritual teacher and guru, and he was saying, hey, this doesn't make sense for me to be a part of this battle, knowing that the consequences was going to follow. And not only knowing that, but knowing that those men that I'm fighting against, they're just being leaders and protecting their own household and lands. I think I'm going to abstain from this war. But the spiritual guru who appeared, which was Lord Krishna, appeared to him and say, no, your assignment to fight in this battle is part of your Dharma. And if you do not rise up to fight, you are now not honoring your Dharma, and it causes other foreseen consequences that you can't see. But the king's defense was, well, what about other people's Dharma who fighting me? And in the Bhagavad Gita, it went on in the preceding chapters to explain to him that there are other larger forces, rules, understandings happening that our human mind cannot comprehend. But we have to honor our role and our duty to our best of our ability, despite other people's roles and their duty. And so sometimes in life, your cooperation with your duty, what you're assigned to do, may bring you in direct conflict with another person's assigned duty and role. And what do you do in those times? You cooperate with your duty and leave it to your higher power. You leave it to the idea and the value of, well, this is what I was created to do for such a time as this. So the Dharma is the idea of Dharma. It really is about your duty despite other people's duty, because it is that concern of other people's duties that interferes so drastically with us cooperating with our role in life. We don't have a problem when we know it benefits other people. When we know that we're doing something that's going to benefit everybody for good, when we understand that there's value in this, it makes it easy. But on this spiritual path, there are times when you are honoring your truth and you're honoring your role or your duty, and you're doing what you need to do, that will bring you in direct conflict with other people's roles and other people's Dharma. And in those times, you'll have to rely on your spiritual evaluation of life or your worship to understand this is what I must do because this is what I'm called to do, despite what other people's other roles or assignments are. There are many stories of children in civil wars who decided to be on the opposing party. And their father, the mother says, you know, I'll have to kill you. And that child or that person to that loved one says, you have to do what you have to do, but I have to do what I got to do. If that means you kill me, so be it. But I've got to honor my calling and my duty. And Dharma is that true cooperation to your assigned role, despite your concern for another people's role. It manifests in the Judeo-Christian Bible with the prophet giving a commandment to one of the leaders of the children of Israel. And the commandment was to burn down, completely destroy and burn down a neighboring village or neighboring tribe of people and to not leave anything. Well, the leader felt like, well, that may be a little bit too extreme. We won't kill everybody. We won't burn everything down. Instead, we will take their treasures and we'll turn them into slaves. We won't kill them. We'll turn them into slaves and we'll take their treasure. And when he presented it to the prophet, to the name of the Lord, the prophet said, no, you were supposed to be obedient. This was not what was supposed to be done. Your obedience is better than your sacrifice. So there are times where our ethics or our material logical reason says, well, I don't want to do this because if I do that, this will upset my father, my parents. This will upset the norm of society. This will upset this person here. Well, this is just the way they're doing it here. Why am I going against it? But Dharma means you've got to accept and play your part, play your role. And when you don't, you can do it when you have that spiritual evaluation of life because you understand that there are higher values, there are higher truths that are governing and operating, and that one, you are not the role that you're playing and you're not your body. You understand that you're the spiritual essence inhabiting that role and that this is just the assigned destiny that you're playing. But when you do not have that spiritual evaluation of life, you dump your Dharma and a flight from duty can occur. And the flight from duty is symbolized by this Seven of Swords card in the tarot deck. We see an individual who is on the run, and we see he's left behind some people. We're not sure why he's flying from duty, but what this card is symbolizing is he is leaving away. He's running away from something. It is mostly associated, or I associate this card with the flight of duty. I always like to animate this card and see that these individuals, let's say this being had an assigned task. He was supposed to fry the eggs in the morning and cook the bacon. Where everybody's asleep, resting assured that he's up doing his part. But when they wake up and there's no one going to have that bacon fried and that egg cooked, they're going to be very disappointed, and they're going to be starving, and they're not going to be able to go out and do their work effectively because he's ran away from his duty. Now, he could have been a slave, so he's trying to free himself, or he could just be like, you know what, I'm tired of this work. We don't know, but what we do know is this person's flying from some type of responsibility. Another powerful story about the flight from duty or not honoring your Dharma is in the Judeo-Christian story of Jonah. Did my screen change when I clicked on that? Or are y'all still seeing the Seven of Swords card?
It hasn't changed.
All right, let's take a little moment to study. Can y'all see it now? Is everybody able to watch it now? Okay. Yeah. All right, so let's do some study. We're going to do a little bit of space. Let's have some study and fellowship really quickly. All right, so I'm going to read this. As I'm reading it, I want y'all to space it out. Look for some spiritual evaluations or some things. Look for some prayer that you can pray, possibly, an attitude, what is the C? Code to follow. What is, anyway. What is, anybody remember what space is? I created it and forgot it. All right. Well, we're going to read this. Shall we read this together?
The C is counsel to follow.
Counsel to follow. Counsel to follow. And then what is the E, Phoenicia?
Encouragement for another.
Encouragement for another. All right, let's see if we can find some space for this. All right, so I'll read it and y'all just listen and look for that. And this was taken from the book of Urantia, a conversation Jesus was having with someone who asked him, is Jonah real? Was the story of Jonah a real story? And what was the meaning of it? And Jesus answered him by saying this. He did not answer whether the story was real or what was it a real story or not. He was smart to not get in that debate. He just answered by simply saying, my friend, we are all Jonahs with lives to live in accordance with the will of God. And at all times when we seek to escape the present duty of living by running away to far off enticements, we thereby put ourselves in the immediate control of those influences which are not directed by the powers of truth and the forces of righteousness. The flight from duty is the sacrifice of truth. The escape from the service of light and life can only result in those distressing conflicts with the difficult wells of selfishness, which lead eventually to darkness and death, unless such God-forsaken Jonahs shall turn their hearts, even when in the very depths of despair, and seek after God and his goodness. And when such disheartened souls sincerely seek for God, and hunger for truth and thirst for righteousness, there is nothing that can hold them further in captivity. No matter into what great depths they may have fallen, when they seek the light with a whole heart, the Spirit of the Lord of God of heaven will deliver them from their captivity. The evil circumstances of life will spew them out upon the dry land of fresh opportunities for renewed service and wiser living. All right. I really always value that flight of duty lesson and the idea of it being a sacrifice of truth. And in that sacrifice of truth, we see that it removes you from the grace, the divine flow. Life becomes hostile in that belly, that well, and you fall under the influence of other lower forces. And this is pictured in the next card. 7 of Swords leads to the 8 of Swords. And in the 8 of Swords, we see a figure who is trapped by her own devices. Even though she's loosely bound and blindfolded, she can easily set herself free. But this picture, she seems to be unwilling because she does not want to take ownership of responsibility, even though she is not far from her castle. She's not far from her home. She sits here waiting to be rescued. And this is what usually happens when you do that flight of duty or you sacrifice your truth and value. It removes you from grace. It puts you in more fears and panic, and you find yourself in a hostile environment. But it's a very, very mild hostile environment. It's more so made up in your mind until you make the decision to put a little bit of effort, seek some truth, make a surrender to get out of it. And you realize, oh, wow, I'm really not that far from my castle. Oh, wow, I'm really not that bound. And oh, wow, this puddle that I was thinking was an ocean or a lake is really just a little mud puddle. I'm really not that bad off. So that is what usually turns out to happen when we run away from our duty, or we what we're doing is we're sacrificing our truth, and it's going to put us in a bad state. And for those who don't know the context of the story of Jonah, excuse me for assuming that you did. I'll rewind quickly and to say the story of Jonah. Jonah was a prophet of the Jews in the ancient days of Israel, who was assigned to speak a rebuke or word of wisdom and spiritual revelation to a tribe. But Jonah, in his mind, reasoned that if he spoke the word to them, 2 things would happen. They would not like it and they would kill him, or they would repent and change. And he didn't want them to kill him, and he didn't want them to change and be prosperous. He actually did not care about the city changing, and he didn't want to be killed. So he was in this place where he says, I don't want them to change and repent, and I don't want them to be upset with me and kill me. So he ran away. He got on a boat. And while he was on this boat, the boat got caught in a storm. They were tossing and turning. And the captains of the boat, the men of the boat says, somebody on this boat has offended the gods. You don't know who it is. And they said, it must be that stranger. And Jonah said, yeah, it's me. I'm running away from some duty. He acknowledged, it's me. I'm running away. The gods are mad at me. And they said, well, get out of the boat. So they threw him off the boat, and he got swallowed up by a whale.
15 minutes.
Until he repented, and then he got spit out. And sure enough, he went back and he did preach to the city, and they did change. And he got upset that they changed. But that was part of his Dharma. And there are times, I'm sure we can relate, there have been times where you don't want to tell people the truth. Because you know, if you correct their ignorance, they may actually change and grow and be different. And sometimes you get in your feelings and your selfishness, you want to see their destruction. I know that may sound horrible, and hopefully none of you all have ever experienced that. But there may be some times you have an enemy or somebody that you just like, you know what, I hope they fail. And I'm not going to share with them this truth. I hope y'all haven't done that, but I know that temptation exists for me a lot of times, you know. But let's yes. Anyway, when you do that, you are actually sacrificing truth, value, and you can find yourself in some type of bondage.
So Adam, I just wanted to say really quick, but what about when it's like you tired of telling them the same thing though, and you're like, you know what, fine, you like, you don't want to listen, then you know the destiny's coming or whatever.
Now you've done your duty. That's you've done your duty. This is those times when you just like, I could share some valuable information, but you know what? I kind of want them to make an ass of themselves.
Okay, so it's a conscious decision not to share the information.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
It's a conscious decision. This may be a better analogy. You are at your work or at a job, and something happens, and you like, That ain't my responsibility. That is not my job description. And you just watch it fall apart. You don't step up. You don't do what you're supposed to do. You say, you know what, I'm not the one that's supposed to be washing the windows. I'm not going to clean that window off. I'm not supposed to be the one greeting that person at the door. Where is the host at? Oh, they ain't there? Well, I'm not going to greet them. It's those little moments like that we do.
And you want to know something? So I got a funny story that I caught myself today. So I do, so I charge those scooters, right? The bird scooters.
Okay.
So today I dropped some off and I was trying to pick up some more, and I saw one laying on the ground and I couldn't pick it up. Like when you try to pick it up, it'll say it's not available. And I like just put it back on the ground. I said, dang, Nicole, like, you didn't even stand the scooter. I said, you ain't even stand the scooter up. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you got mad and just left the scooter on the ground. Whereas I am a representative of the scooter people, so I should have at least spin it back up, you know what I'm saying? Not just leave it laying on the ground, right?
Yeah.
So, I kind of consciously thought about that, and it was just like, well, what's like, dang, Nicole, you just left the scooter on the ground, you didn't even pick it up just because you couldn't get it.
Yes, that is actually a great example of cooperation or service. All right. Anybody else want to share anything from the space when we spaced out the story of the flight from duty from the book, the excerpt from the book of Urantia and Jonah? And that interpretation. Leslie, you quiet today, but I'm not going to harass you.
Well, no, when we were first reading through it, the first thing that was coming up to me immediately was, well, okay, so sincerity. And then the next slide we went straight into is the sacrifice of truth and value. So I was like, well, you kind of said it. Like, you have to really be questioning yourself. And I think when we were speaking before about like when you're holding back from someone else, that's when you go back to those 5 levels of truth, right? Because there's only one level where you actually say anything to anybody else. So at some point you got to like check, is this really about me? I mean, am I really trying to withhold something from them, or am I acting from, or am I like, oh snap, I am an ambassador for this, I should have picked that up, right? Like, so it still goes back to the truth and checking yourself, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Adam, I just want to say, I think that this class, like, see how my subconscious said that to me? Like, I had already walked away from the scooter. Like, I was already in the car. But the next one, I picked it up.
Okay.
And that's what this class does to me. Like, you're really sowing some really, really strong, solid seeds that are staying with me for real.
Oh, good. That's my Dharma. All right. Bill, are you going to contribute something from?
Yeah, I wanted to throw in one thing that when people start talking about Dharma, I've studied the Bhagavad Gita a lot, and a lot of times we forget one part about it, and that is Dharma is where the juice is. That's where, if you want to feel good, connect to your Dharma. So the way of going away from Dharma is the way of suffering and misery and discomfort and that sort of thing. Two different people in the same situation might have different dharmas and have to do two different things to really stay deeply connected to that sort of divine juice, But we get started talking about how, like, all the difficult aspects and the intellectual aspects of Dharma, and it's really about staying connected to that amazing joy.
Very beautiful, Bill. And that is why I connected to worship. That is exactly why I connect that worship is that overflow. Because in that worship, you fill yourselves up with that inner joy. And from that inner joy, you do whatever it takes to maintain that joy, to hold on to that joy, to stay in that joy. And that requires your Dharma. And I love how Bill illustrated that Dharma is different for some people. There may be a mother, it is her dharma for the sake of her children to leave her partner, to leave her husband, and for the sake of the children, the sake of her responsibility, motherhood, to get her environment and her home safe and from that hostile home. It may be the dharma of another mother that even though she has an incooperative or partner, but it may be for the sake of her children and for the sake of her responsible mother, she has to stay in that marriage and stay with that spouse. But ultimately, her joy will be returned to her. But I love how Bill illustrated that sometimes it is all different. Our dharma requires different things and different responsibilities based on us. But that misery that unfolds, that discomfort that unfolds when you sacrifice your values, sacrifice your truth by flying away from your duty and flying away from your dharma, it is a very uncomfortable situation, really illustrated here in the Eight of Swords. The Eight of Swords is that feeling of uncomfort and miserableness, but one that you can still easily get out of. Easily get out of if you face the truth and get that blindfold off of you and do a little wiggle room. All right. Cooperation not only benefits, not only keeps you in that juice of joy and allows that worship to be free flowing, but cooperation leads to progress in other areas of our life and our society. It's the selfless acts of others that have gifted societies our greatest accomplishments. Think about public education. I don't know if y'all are familiar with this, but the public education system started from Sunday schools, okay? Education was a private matter up until the 1700s or 1800s. And there was countless of illiteracy was a widespread problem, but there were a growing movement among a lot of Christians who became very, very pressed with this idea of teaching children how to read. Their motive may have been teaching them how to read for the sake of learning Christianity, converting into Christianity. But the idea was they gave them this one day a week on Sunday when most poor children were able to have a day off from having to work in the factories during the Industrial Revolution period. And they taught them basic elementary skills. And that growing movement spread to America. And the only way some people ever got any type of public education was through these Christian Sunday schools, which ultimately became our public school system. Healthcare, the healthcare phenomena in its widespread growth from the Middle Ages onward came from these Christian values of healing the sick and taking care of the orphans and the widows. So many of the clinics and hospitals derive their use and derive their whole beingness from the values of other people's being this idea of service for the sick and service for those in need. I think about a good example of Dharma is Abraham Lincoln and slavery. Abraham Lincoln was very, very tormented with the idea of having to split the nation over this idea of slavery. But he also was torn with his morals, and he was torn with the idea of preserving the Union. There was a lot of stress of a lot of different acts, but he understood that even though this war was going to cause a lot of harm and be very deadly, he felt like it was his dharma to preserve the Union and to finally accept this cause of abolishing slavery. Martin Luther King Jr., when you think of, you study his life, Martin Luther King himself, growing up in a very somewhat middle class, wasn't directly oppressed by Jim Crow laws or segregation directly. He was able to excel enough to get his doctorate. But what he realized is that the general population and future generations were going to be oppressed and put in a sense of limitation because of inequality. So he took up that cause knowing that this may lead to the loss of his life, knowing it would put his family in jeopardy, knowing that he would sacrifice his time for his family, but he honored that call and that duty to be the spokesperson for civil rights, knowing the greater end of what could come, knowing that there were powers that be that he was going to go in direct contradictory to. So how do we discover our Dharma? It arises from, excuse that spelling error, studying the laws of nature, spirit, and mind, prayer, asking to be shown how to offer yourself for the sake of others, worship, filling yourself up with the divine goods within, getting that joy that Bill spoke about, and fellowship, interacting with others with similar values. Through those areas, or those from these four things primarily, I realize is that really gives you a sense of understanding. When you study, you get a better sense of where the spirit is moving. You get a better understanding of how the spirit and the progress is flowing, and then you cooperate with it. You can pray and ask yourself, how can you be a part of this progress? Show you how to ask, how to use your talents, your time to best be of service for the spirit and the progress of the world. And then worship, we get in that joy, we get that juice, we fill ourselves up, and then we can see what needs to be done to maintain that. What's the Dharma to do? We're going to feel the most, stay in that sense of grace, mercy, that inner joy. And sometimes it's revealed to us through our fellowship with other people, through our interacting with the people. We're encouraged, we're being shown as a mirror to other people. Well, here's what you're good at. Here's some value that you have. Here are some benefits that I feel like you have to offer rest of society in the world. All right. Believe it or not, I finished right at 11 o'clock. So that was a quick lesson on Dharma and duty. We have some more time, so why not let's talk about it and discuss this in detail. Bill, since you studied Dharma, feel free to attribute. Let's ask some questions. Let's get in some conversations about Dharma, cooperation. I know there's a lot of intellectual talk about this, but hopefully it gave you some insight on how important this agency of cooperation and service is in not just yourself, but in the world at large.
So it's not really a question, but I did get some thoughts and have some ideas. Like, is this the open space for that? So I was thinking when we're talking about Dharma, like on the lesser point, like, you know, when you think about gratitude and acts of kindness and being part of our service, and how many people are like, you know, they're like, oh, I'm a kind person, but they're not really doing the kindness for the act itself. They're like, you don't let somebody, like, how many people get upset? Like, you let somebody in front of you and they don't give you the wave to say thank you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, really? Oh, well, that's fine. But really, like, if we step back and like, okay, but I'm here to bring kindness into the world. I did that in line with my service, with my faith and my, you know, connection to spirit. Like, they don't really have to say thank you. That's kind of back to that, without being concerned for the other person's role, you know, like they're acting out whatever they're supposed to be doing. And then I was thinking, like, you know, when we're talking about everybody's concerned with everyone else's life, and then back to like what we were discussing last week with the exogenesis story, and it's like, you know, we produce these dumb children, like we have social media, all of these things are aspects that are getting our society to be like awesome defectors. We're so concerned with everyone's life that if we were going back to sincerity and practicing our surrender and just knowing who we were, like, heaven forbid I'm ever asked to kill somebody, but like if I were so solid in my faith and my Dharma, and be like, okay, well, I know that is part of the duty. And so like I see there's a lot, and you know, and then even like you could look at like the universal laws and the law of vibration. And it's like if you're in tune with your frequency, then you start to see other possibilities of things that are meant for you to be following through with, and not just like, for everybody else's path, but they're all around you at all times. So this got me thinking. I was quiet because I was really trying to like think and not talk so much, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very good. That's again why study is important, because you study those laws, you study other things, and very well said. This idea of service is the agent of transformation of the world. And yes, it does start with our own frequency, but when we go past that, if we want to change the world or help facilitate progress in the world, this idea of service really helps. Anybody else?
I could chat for a minute.
Yes, please, Bill.
Another aspect of Dharma that I think that you have touched on, but for me, it's one of the really big deals, is that the nice thing about Dharma is we don't have to intellectually, we probably cannot intellectually figure it out anyway. What works really is to tune in, and tuning in is different for different people, and some people meditate, some people do journeying, prayer. All of these are great, but to basically open, kind of get our own noise out of the way and open to guidance, and then we get told, pretty clearly what to do, and sometimes we're really confused, but that sort of means that we let the noise, overcome the real beauty and connection that we naturally can have. So that real interconnection is such a big part of Dharma.
Yeah, and once again, that interconnection is what I refer to when I say that worship is. That's why worship is service and service is worship. It really is. That is pretty much why I connect those two in that way, because that interconnection, being in that inner alignment, staying in that inner alignment with those inner goods from that true inner essence or presence of God, really is what overflows into service. And that service brings it back, keeps you into it. Love can mostly only be maintained by being emptied out on other people. So when you experience the love from within, in order to maintain and hold on to it, it's got to be shared through some type of loving act or service that is required or needed of you, whether it's your dharma, your duty, or some other act of ministry. Well, this was a short lesson, but I hope that it was a seed of understanding to help bring value, help enhance your value understanding of incorporating the agency of service and cooperation of Dharma into your personal religion. And just letting you remember the importance of it, of this agency in bringing about change to the world and keeping you in that state of worship. For me, when I do my worship process that we talked about, that line after the create an emotional address, the affirmations, the last part of that process is what do I need to do? What act of service do I need to do to maintain this? And it is hard and tough. And that's where fellowship comes in at, because I struggle with being so concerned about the material things that's going on that I forget to make myself to respond to my duty of being a spiritual teacher and offering spiritual insight. Or sometimes I get so concerned about what other teachers are doing that I'm like, well, there's no need for me, like, well, so-and-so teaching so well, or so-and-so has this class, or so-and-so doing that. I can be let off the hook. And I hope that y'all aren't having that same experience with me. And maybe some of you are saying, well, Adam is teaching or Adam's doing that. But no, we need your individual voice. There are people that only you will be able to minister to, that they will not be able to receive from me. So when you fail to do your role, you're missing out. Other people miss out. And you might say, well, I'll just send them Adam's PowerPoint, or I'll send them Adam's video. But no, they actually may need to hear it in your way through their connection with you. So all of us are spiritual teachers. All of us are spiritual guidance people. So I'm going to stop the class. We stop recording now. And I just got all of a sudden, I'm going to stop the class now. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to start recording. I stopped recording.